And bad morning, everybody. This is episode 51 of Bad Morning News, brought to you by Brave Browser, the ad resistant, tracker resistant browser, and our patrons. Thank you very much. This is being broadcast on the 1st of October 2018, and this will be my fifth to last broadcast for some time at least until my new job opportunity is past probation and I'm able to ask if I can do this again. Right now, I'm just happy that I've managed to land permanent work somewhere. But right now, let's focus on some more less topical personal news and something that may actually scare everybody to bits. Where is it? There we go. So this was posted on September 28th, 2018, as breaking news. Facebook admits it was hacked. 50 million accounts access tokens were compromised. Facebook admits security breach affected 50 million accounts. Attackers stole Facebook access tokens that they then, quote, then use to take over people's accounts. Facebook has admitted to having a, quote, security issue with nearly 50 million accounts, which had their, quote, access tokens compromised. The social media giant has reset tokens for another 40 million accounts as a, quote, precaution. The issue affected nearly 50 million accounts, which would require users to re-enter their passwords. The security issue was also discovered by the company's engineers on Tuesday. Hackers have apparently been able to fetch the so-called, quote, access tokens, which are digital keys, which allow users to stay logged into Facebook and to not re-enter their passwords each time they use the application. Our investigation is still in its early stages, but it's clear that attackers exploited a vulnerability in Facebook's code that impacted, quote, view as, a feature that lets people see what their own profile looks like to someone else, the tech giant said in a statement. The vulnerability has already been fixed, according to Facebook, and the view as feature has been temporarily disabled, which is probably their fix. This attack exploited the complex interaction of multiple issues in our code. It stemmed from a change we made to our video uploading feature in July 2017, which impacted view as. The attackers not only needed to find this vulnerability and use it to get an access token, they had to pivot from that account to others to steal more tokens, Facebook stated. So the attack was sophisticated, in other words. Damage done by the attack is yet to be evaluated. It remains unclear whether or not affected accounts were, quote, misused or any information accessed. Sources of the attack and who was behind it also remained unidentified, according to Facebook. There's a number of tweets from a Sarah Fleischer that are also included on this article from the Free Thought Project. Zuckerberg prepared remarks, quote, they did try to query profile information through our API, but we don't know if any private information, addresses, etc. were found that way. So yeah, it's getting a bit. Facebook is suffering from a fairly basic issue, which is somebody managed to find a way to spoof or manipulate hashes, which is what they are. These access tokens are just a bunch of characters that have been generated based upon other pieces of information to identify that a user is a valid user. It's a simple method that does work, but it isn't foolproof, and it never will be. You can increase your encryption to an insane degree, and it will still eventually be decryptable by some system, and you can spoof that. Takes a lot of effort, but it can be done, and this just shows, yes, it can, and affect a lot of people in the process. What are your thoughts, Cryptic?
Yeah, it definitely is it's kind of funny. I think the story broke on like Friday evening, so it seems like maybe they wanted to avoid as much coverage as possible. But yeah, I mean it's not surprising. As you said, it's never impossible to do these things, and It's just another reason why people shouldn't have blind faith in them, and especially, it reminds me of when a while ago there was that story that came out where they were telling people they were telling its users to send them their nudes so they could safeguard them, and so that they could alert you if your nudes were being used in an unauthorized way, and this just goes to show that's not a good idea. So yeah, I mean, I definitely don't understand this complete blind faith in them, and um, it's always good to have some personal limits and know that anything you're putting out there on the internet, no matter how secure you think it is, especially with these companies, it's just not a good idea.
No, I mean, it's a critical thing to always remember. Know what you're willing to share. And if you're not willing to share certain details online, don't. If you do, be damn sure that there's some form of liability against those who are storing their information that you can rely on if they fail to secure it. Because otherwise, you're basically allowing yourself to be conned easily by anybody's negligence, as well as anybody who wants to hack you to bits and steal your identity. And believe me, there are a lot of people out there who will try this.
Yeah, I mean, it's why not? Knowing Facebook is such a uh, such a great source for so many different records of people, where people just have so much faith in it, they're willing to put in all their personal information. So it's definitely a great target for any bad actor in there.
Yeah, well, let's move on to another social network which has decided to, quote, get woke. Why don't you cover that one from the Free Thought Project on the Reddit quarantine?
Sure. Right, this is from the Free Thought Project. Reddit now quarantining users who question 9/11. Direct users to government site instead. Written by Matt Agarist. A highly popular subreddit devoted to posting information which proposed information outside the official narrative to 9/11 has been quarantined by the Reddit administrators. The community has effectively been cut off from the rest of the platform, and anyone who wishes to view its contents are forced to go through a checkpoint while being redirected to a government website. On Thursday, the subreddit r911 Truth was placed under a Reddit quarantine. The Reddit administrators claimed that the subreddit posts misinformation and then directed people seeking information on 9/11 to the official government website. It may contain a high degree of misinformation. If you are seeking historic information about the September 11 attacks, please visit the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States. And then it gives the 9/11 commission.gov site. That's the text that appears on the screen if you try to access this subreddit. According to Reddit, communities are placed under quarantine to prevent others from accidentally stumbling upon this information. Reddit, like most other social media platforms, has begun to control the flow of information and crowning themselves arbiters of truth. The purpose of quarantining a community is to prevent its content from being accidentally viewed by those who do not knowingly wish to do so or viewed without appropriate context. Quarantined subreddits and their subscribers are still fully obliged to abide by Reddit's content policy and remain subject to enforcement measures. Quarantine communities will display a warning that requires users to explicitly opt in to viewing the content. They generate no revenue, do not appear in non-subscription based feeds, for example, popular, and are not included in search or recommendations. Reddit may also enforce a number of additional product restrictions that exist currently or as they may develop in the future. For example, removing custom styling tools. The idea of Reddit redirecting people away from this open source subreddit to the official 9/11 Commission website is as ironic as it is ominous. The 9/11 Commission admitted it was railroaded in their own investigation, and it is full of controversy. Not only were the commissioners given extremely limited funds to conduct their investigation, but they were also met with dead ends in almost every direction. For starters, only $15 million was given to investigate 9/11. Compare that to the over $60 million that was spent investigating Clinton's affair with Monica, and the travesty becomes greater. This was the largest act of murder in recent U.S. history, and more money was spent investigating a philandering president. Also, Senator Max Cleland, who resigned from the 9/11 Commission after calling it a national scandal, stated in a 2003 PBS interview, "I'm saying that's deliberate. I am saying that the delay in relating this information to the American public out of a series of hearings that several members of Congress knew 8 or 10 months ago, including Bob Graham and others, that was deliberately slow-walked. The 9/11 Commission was deliberately slow-walked because the administration's policy was, and its priority was, we're going to take Saddam Hussein out." In 2006, the Washington Post reported that several members of the 9/11 Commission suspected deception on part of the Pentagon. As reported, questioning the government is how we maintain freedom and attempt to seek truth. When social media giants like Reddit quarantine this information and claim that there is only one official source for it, and that source is the government, they are complicit in deceiving the citizens. Let's see. FBI agents have come forward claiming they were railroaded by the CIA when they had information that the attack was going to take place, claiming it was preventable. Thousands of architects and engineers have come forward challenging the government's account of why the 3 buildings collapsed that day, and the US government admitted to covering up Saudi Arabia's role in 9/11. These and many other reasons are why subreddits like 9/11 Truth exist and are necessary. Yeah, so that's the gist of that. Yeah, I mean, not surprising now. Now that all these social media sites have come out saying that they want to be gatekeepers and make sure that innocent minds don't accidentally fall prey to the evil disinformation artists, as they paint anyone who has any questions about the official story, and we're just directed to the government story, which is funny because even among the most mainstream people, like some of these politicians who were on the committees investigating supposedly 9/11 have come out and said that it was pretty much a joke. So to see social media try to push these things out there as absolute fact or something like that is pretty hilarious. And I think that part where it said that they want to protect people from seeing that content without context, again, is really hilarious, because a good thing something that would really need context would be anything put out there by the mainstream media, or especially anything put out directly by the government. That would be something I would like to see people have quote unquote context for. So
I love that term as well, slow walked, because it does visually describe exactly what they basically did to the commission, just the same as they've been doing to the OIG for the past 8 years or so, at least. Every time they ask for more information, they get delays and we sent it to you, didn't we? And no, you didn't. Please send it, and chasing and rechasing and whatnot until finally somebody has to file a bloody subpoena just to get a single piece of documentation across. It's ludicrous. And the 9/11 Commission is just yet another example of that, and with limited funding. whereas the DOJ has some significant, well, at least a decent budget for the OIG. It's not as bad. I actually need to look up just how bad it is, though, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous for Reddit as well to go full turtle and basically say, no, you can't talk about this. You've got to go to the official channel to discuss it, or get information on it. It just goes to show that if you want to discuss something political, don't go to Reddit. But you can't go to Facebook or Twitter either. So I don't know, Minds maybe, or Steam It, any of the ones that are a bit more distributed. You may have a bit of a chance of actually getting information that you might not get elsewhere from the official sources, which screamed about how limited their resources to investigate the issue were. But hey, as we all know, jet fuel does melt steel beams, obviously.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yes, there is an article that we can share on that for Max Ogburn. I'll go ahead and throw that into the Discord channel. In the meantime, why don't you cover the other one regarding the wonderful waste of military budget that occurred in North Carolina?
Oh, yeah. Yes. So this is from ZeroHedge.com, from their Tyler Durden writer. America's costliest stealth fighter crashes in South Carolina. A mere day after the Department of Defense touted its first ever combat engagement in Afghanistan, the multi-billion-dollar development and cutting-edge Marine F-35B stealth fighter has now experienced another first. One has crashed near a Marine base in Beaufort, South Carolina. A second Marine Aircraft Wing F-35B belonging to Marine Fighter Attack Training Squadron 501, stationed at Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, crashed in the vicinity of Beaufort, South Carolina at approximately 11:45 a.m. today, said a statement. And just to say, this happened, I guess, on Friday. Said a statement from the 2nd Marine Air Wing. The U.S. Marine pilot safely ejected from the single-seat aircraft and is currently being evaluated by medical personnel, said the statement. There were no civilian injuries. Marines from MCAS Beaufort are working with local authorities, currently conducting standard mishap operations to secure the crash site and ensure the safety of all personnel in the surrounding area. The jet was reportedly on a training mission and appears to have gone down over a forested area, as early photos show black smoke rising over a tree line in a rural area. The Beaufort County Sheriff's Office has closed off the area and an investigation is underway. Previously, the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office confirmed that a Marine Corps aircraft had crashed in a rural part of Beaufort County. The Marine Corps confirmed that it was one of theirs, a sheriff's office spokesman told ABC News. Residents reported hearing multiple explosions in the area, and an anonymous Marine Corps source has told Stars and Stripes that the over $100 million plane has been completely destroyed. The aircraft was a total loss, according to a Marine official who spoke on condition of anonymity. An investigation into the incident could take months to determine the cause, the official said. Kensley Crosby, a Beaufort resident who lives near the area where the F-35B crashed, told the Beaufort Gazette newspaper that she heard an explosion and saw smoke coming from the scene. Kensley said she heard 3 to 4 additional explosions within 30 minutes of the crash. According to CNN, the announced per-unit price tag for the Marine Corps F-35B was $115.5 million, and the total acquisition cost for the advanced fighter produced by Lockheed Martin is projected at $406.1 billion, which has made it controversial as the single most expensive defense development program on a single weapon system in U.S. history. U.S. military officials confirmed in the hours after the news broke that it marks the first time the F-35B has crashed, either in training or in operations. The fighter reportedly completed its first operational airstrikes against Taliban targets on Thursday, which U.S. official social media channels heavily promoted throughout the day. The Pentagon has long planned to make the Joint Strike Fighter. Oh, great. Sorry, I lost the page there. The Pentagon has long planned to make the Joint Strike Fighter the main combat aircraft for the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, and the DoD previously announced plans to purchase more than 2,600. The version of the F-35B that the Marine Corps uses has the ability to take off and land vertically. However, the Marine Corps said Friday's crash did not occur while attempting either, but while in flight. And so that's that article there. And these things are kind of like deja vu because I just recall another very similar article from a couple of years ago where they had some other really expensive new fighter jet crash, and then there was the whole scandal with, I guess, the original F-35s that they said that multiple branches didn't even want because they said they weren't working properly, and of course billions had already been spent on that, and then afterwards they said, oh well, this is actually not working well according even to the heads of the different branches there. And there was also another aircraft that takes off vertically. I think it was called the Osprey. That was another Marine Corps aircraft that had crashes in, I believe, around the base in Japan, Okinawa area.
Mate, the
So
Osprey is one of those ones that's gotten even coverage by pundits and the like comedic pundits like Dave Barry, who has a regular column, I think, in the or had at least a regular column in the Post. Whether or not he still does, I have no idea. But he did pieces on the Osprey being a complete waste of money, basically, and they were hilarious. And that this is the problem: is most of these boondoggles, and that is the proper name for them, really don't get any use. They're total epic failures 9 times out of 10. And when they aren't, they either get suppressed or they are far too difficult to utilize in mass manufacture and require tons of money. And it doesn't surprise me that yet another stealth fighter decided to be a little bit less stealthy. But hey, this is your tax money at work, people. So enjoy it while you can, because when it crashes like that, that's it literally going up in flames. So yeah, and there's always that risk. When you can always have a fail of some description, and when something's that complicated, it's far more likely to occur.
yeah, just keep voting harder, I guess. If we just vote for the right politician, they'll put an end to all this, I guess. The Social Democrat. I guess, yeah, that's what we're supposed to think.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to think, isn't it? Well, I'm gonna segue a bit to European news at the moment, but it's still tied slightly to the previous story and this one. It's from the BBC. It was published on the 28th of September in the technology section. Google to be sued by Belgium for not blurring military sites. Google is facing legal action from Belgium for not blurring images of military sites. The Belgian Defense Ministry had requested that the company obscure air bases in its satellite imagery. A spokesman for Google said it had been working closely with the Belgian government for 2 years. The Ministry of Defense will sue Google, a spokeswoman for the ministry told Reuters. Further details about the legal action were not given, although the ministry is said to have requested sites such as nuclear power plants and air bases be blurred on the Search Giant satellite imagery. Let's see. There are three other articles as well that may be of interest for our readers linked into this one, which is Google tracks users who turn off location history, which we've covered. Ex-Google employee warns of disturbing China plans, which I believe we covered last week. And Google hit with 4.3 billion Android fine from the EU, which they're still fighting against. It's a shame that the Belgian Department of Defense have decided to take this decision, Michael Saliet, spokesman for Google in Belgium, said in a statement. Quote, we have been working closely with them for more than 2 years, making changes to our maps where asked to, making them legal under Belgian law. We plan to continue working with them in that spirit of cooperation. The company has previously been asked to obscure sensitive military sites in the countries including France, Germany, and the Netherlands. Google Street View is currently unapproved in India. In 2016, the Defense Ministry there cited concerns over the security of sensitive military installations as a reason for not letting the company map street-level images. Earlier this year, security concerns were raised over the fitness tracking firm Strava. The company's heat maps, generated by its users as they run or cycle, were shown to expose the exercise routines of military personnel in secret bases around the world. That's the end of the article. And yes, that particular incident for Strava was, to me, hilarious because that was just an epic device misunderstanding fail. Anyone who is a member of the military shouldn't be wearing a GPS tracker from a private company on a military base. And if they intend to do that, that military base better damn well have a good radar jammer if it's a secret one. Because it's not something that you're going to easily get to shut down. It's something that you should just get them to take off or not wear at all when they're at work.
Yeah.
Alternatively, the military could spend millions developing its own fitness trackers. I could just see it now, and that would be my fault for suggesting the idea as well. Oh well.
Yeah. Yeah, just ridiculous all around.
Yeah, it can't be helped. But Belgium at the moment's been a little bit prevalent in the news because they're just being a bit strange and silly. There's another article I wanted to quickly cover from the Express this time, .co.uk, by Joe Barnes, Brussels correspondent. Quote, they want to come to your country. Belgian minister blames UK for EU's migration woes. Belgium's firebrand immigration minister has placed an extraordinary level of blame on, quote, beautiful Britain for Europe's immigration woes ahead of a visit to a number of the country's main ports on Monday. There's a video associated with this as well. Theo Franken insisted the quote British way of life plays a huge role in the decision undertaken by the would-be asylum seekers planning on taking the treacherous journey from either the Middle East or Africa to Europe. He has called for Belgium and Britain to sign a bilateral deal which could see millions of pounds sent to the continent in order to handle illegal migration. Speaking to the Express.co.uk in Brussels, he demanded the British do not hide behind Brexit during European Union-wide discussions on how to tackle the contentious issue of migration. Mr. Franken is currently leading a crackdown on illegal immigrants, mainly from Iraq, in the Belgian capital of Brussels, the beating heart of the EU. He said, quote, we tried to get them to return to Iraq, but now they say they don't want to return. They want to go to the UK. I wonder why. The controversial immigration minister added migrants crossing into Europe, quote, all want to go to your country because you don't have identity cards. You have a very lucrative black markets, and you have a lot of English-speaking migrants from those communities. Your country, the British way of life, is really the push factor, he declared. Having already met with Home Secretary Sajid Javid, Mr. Franken is preparing to tell Immigration Minister Caroline Noakes she will not be able to hide behind Brexit, and illegal attempts to enter Britain will not stop the UK-EU divorce. The Belgian minister said, quote, "For me, it's nothing to do with Brexit because you're not even in the Schengen area. Even though there's a Brexit, there will still be migrants to go to the UK. It won't stop because you're out of the European Union. The European Union has nothing to do with this." I'll address that in a minute. Mr. Stokes and Mr. Franken will meet at a gathering of EU Home Affairs ministers in Luxembourg in 2 weeks' time. While member states argue amongst themselves, Mr. Franken is hoping to agree a bilateral migration agreement between Britain and Belgium, similar to the one signed between Theresa May and Emmanuel Macron in January. Paris and London agreements see Britain stumping up 44.5 million for extra security measures in France to prevent another refugee camp forming in Calais or other Channel ports. I will meet my UK colleagues in Luxembourg in 2 weeks and hope to have an agreement because we really are demanding the UK does more for the border protection of the Bruges port. We need a UK and Belgium bilateral as soon as possible because the problem is really increasing and Britain has to want to help us out. They really are all trying to get into your country. There's more to this article, not a huge amount, but to be honest, I find it bit blame pointing. Usually, it's most of them were trying, if I remember, originally to get into Germany or some other place, and now that those places are starting to say no, we don't really want them. It's all Britain's fault. Isn't that intriguing? It couldn't possibly be due to the fact that you demanded people take migrants in, that you have too many migrants because you didn't quite calculate the amount of impact that would have on your local areas. Couldn't possibly be those policies that could be at fault. No, it's Britain's fault, of course. That makes complete sense. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Britain doesn't have its faults. I mean, we currently think that there's a right not to be offended here in law, and I don't know why anybody considers that valid just due to basic philosophical principles on negative rights and exclusive properties. It just doesn't work. Um, Not logically, at least. However, they've got it here in law, and that does cause us some problems. And that does attract a lot of people to Britain who enjoy exploiting those problems. However, that doesn't mean that you have to expect Britain to protect your borders. That seems, or at least fund it. That seems grossly misunderstanding what uh, is necessary there. I mean, if you've got an immigration problem, why don't you deal with it by making the EU agree to restrict its borders better? You know, like Hungary and Poland and other countries are demanding the EU do. It seems like that's what you're actually shouting for, but because you don't want to sound like one of them, you have to blame Britain. And look to yourself first before you start casting aspersions, mate. What do you think, though, Cryptic? Migration. Is it a problem?
Yeah, I mean, just the messiness of that situation is, just another reason to avoid all of these entanglements. It doesn't need to be so complicated. Just be responsible for funding, the defense of your own country's borders instead of having to blame, the UK, blame whoever. Because they joined into the EU and decided to erode their own sovereignty and to give away their own power and making their own decisions. So
Yeah.
to me, that's just kind of
This
what
is
what I thought about that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, they are seem there. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the idea of the government importing people is just not good, not helpful to anyone in the
mm-mm.
long run. So I mean, it is bizarre to see that. And I feel like a lot of time, I mean, that is fueling a lot of that divisiveness, and I mean, there is a lot of things. Uh, from what I've seen, there are things going on in some of the, like in France and wherever, a lot of this pushback, like with trying to banning burqas and whatever. But that's to be expected when you all of a sudden will import a whole different culture of people, and of course there's always going to be a reaction, and that's what some of these types who are the types who are for importing all of these people just want to gloss over and call everyone a racist for criticizing that idea of importing just masses of people. So
Mm,
just
it is a
messy.
bit mental, really, if you think about it, because I mean, the policies were basically, yeah, come in. I mean, we bond you the fuck out of existence, but yeah, come in. Don't worry about it. We'll provide you a home over here now. We know that you probably are a bit pissed at us still, but hey, come on over. We'll give you land. Well, we won't, but we'll give you a job at least, and around you will be complaining about it, but you'll still have that job, and we'll give you benefits, and we'll give you this, and we'll give you that. And no, it doesn't work that way, unfortunately, in reality, and people suffer for it, and they think they can have a free ride. And compared to the life that they probably used to have, they can. It's or something comparable to it, at least. But that's not how it works everywhere, and it's not how it works for everyone. And it sure as hell doesn't work in the long run.
Yeah, I feel like some of these governments are looking forward to basically divide and conquer, just to use this as a destabilizing factor in getting people to for war against each other and not look at the government as the source of these problems.
Yeah, I know. And speaking of government sorts of being problems, I thought it'd be worth flying over quickly to Canada to have a look at some issues that political parties are currently facing there. This is from Richmond News. And just to let you know, I'm gonna read the title, and then I'm gonna read what caught my eye on the side and underneath the advert section. BBC political parties face personal data collection investigation. Victoria Company being investigated for data collection in Brexit vote. And right next to it is a birth tourism poll, which is looking for political understanding on your how you think birth tourism should be fixed from a policy perspective, which seems a bit ironic, but hey. How British Columbia political parties harvest and use personal information from social media will be subject to an Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner investigation within the next month, Commissioner Michael McEvoy said September 28th. How they are collecting and using voters' personal information, McEvoy asked. News was part of McEvoy's comments in Vancouver to BC Information Summit 2018 delegates. He said only BC has the power to make such an examination, although his federal counterpart is urging federal parties to get on board. Quote, politicians realize that uses, misuses, and abuses of data in a personal context can change elections. University of Victoria political science professor Colin Bennett said. Quote, political affiliation is something that should only be captured with individual consent. That's absolutely true, by the way. That is technically the law in a lot of countries. I think the US has some minor piece towards it, even as well. Speaker said greater oversight is needed over how Canadian political parties collect and use voter personal information. Political parties identifying their voter bases can vacuum up personal information shared on social media. And that can start with something as simple as an election voters list readily available to political parties. McAvoy said reviews of how parties use information has already led to auditing in the United Kingdom, where he has assisted in the work of that country's information commissioner, his BC predecessor. That is something we are going to be doing in British Columbia, he said. Bennett said political parties, quote, are the major organizations that fall between the cracks of a privacy regime that is either federal or provincial or is corporate or government. He said parties use voter lists as a basis for gathering information on members of the electorate. Bennett cites the example of Liberalists, the federal Liberal Party's voter identification system. He said use of the list is excluded from no phone call regulations of the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission designed to prevent nuisance calls. As well, Bennett explained parties are not covered by federal anti-spam legislation. That law prevents companies from sending people messages via electronic devices. It said that the proposed Federal Election Modernization Act sections supposed to deal with privacy are, quote, basic and incomplete. Further, Bennett said, parties do not have privacy policies, but but those are vague and don't necessarily mesh with each other. Curiously, explained former Manitoba NDP government cabinet employee Jason Wowada, if political party canvassers go out knocking on doors and loses a voters list, that's a data breach because it puts personal information in the hands of people untrained in its control. The issues surrounding the use of personal data were highlighted recently in the Cambridge Analytica case, Bennett said. There's significantly more to this, but I think you get the gist, basically. There's a lot of data collection going on by political parties. And it's a real concern because as we are beginning to see certain industries in particular have a problem with certain political viewpoints. And those viewpoints being toxic environmentally to work with, not because of the viewpoint itself, but because of the response to it, means that if a private company, for example, is somehow affiliated with a particular party, and that party says, well, they're not on our list, that person could be denied a job or could be denied some form of service simply because of their political affiliation. And it could be that they are the perfect kind of candidate for this, but because they're not a left leaner or a right leaner or some other direction, as it were, they won't be offered whatever service or opportunity could have been made available as part of advertising. Now, this may not seem like a big issue, but to me, it's a form of limitation. It's a form of social manipulation, and I don't consider that fair. People have the ability to make their own minds up on whatever they want to believe. And if you don't like what they believe, then you can choose not to associate with those people or associate very sparingly at the bare minimum. And if you find them absolutely repugnant, just avoid them. It's very simple. You don't have to engage. It's quite easy not to sometimes. But hey, there's little reason to even try in those cases. But with this kind of thing, where you're dealing politics directly, they have a lot more information on forms probably than you know. And if it's a survey or something being done, they have a wide range of your political beliefs. And in this day and age, that kind of information now can be used maliciously quite easily, as people are trying to demonstrate with Kavanaugh and whatnot. You just have to word it in a certain way to make very spurious claims without really claiming anything, or certainly nothing legitimate.
Yeah, that's a bizarre road to start going down. I feel like even just basic voter registration in the U.S. is already a lot of information because I've never registered to vote, but I know I've looked up people. I've like just typed in their names in Google, and up comes their voter registration information, which includes their address, and I believe it does include like party affiliation, if any. And so to me, that's just weird. You have your name, age, address, and your party affiliation. That just comes up right there because all of that information from registering to vote is all entered into their database and just easily. Yeah, and it is a matter of public record. I guess it's considered that. So that's why they just put that all out there. I don't know. Just makes me glad I've never decided to register. So.
Yeah, I never have registered with a party. To be fair, the only time I ever voted was once. It was a write-in for Ron Paul. So I consider that my one admission to trying the system and finding it didn't work for me. So, but hey, but we'll see what goes. We'll see what happens as a result of this. But yeah, we do have a few more stories to hit up. Why don't you cover that one from Reason about the TSA? Because that title is just gold.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, so this is from Reason.com. Working for TSA is only thing worse than being searched by TSA, report finds. The House report will make you feel sorry for TSA employees against your will. This is written by Joe Sechin. Millions of travelers hate the TSA thanks to its invasive body scans, its pat downs that border on molestation, and its general ineffectiveness when it comes to evaluating threats. But it's not just flyers who are treated terribly. The TSA is also plagued by a toxic workplace culture where senior officials' misconduct goes unpunished and those who threaten to speak out face retaliation, according to a report from Republicans on the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. The committee says its probe started in 2015 when it started receiving credible allegations of wrongdoing. The investigators found a host of problems which the committee believes are directly related to low employee morale. The report released yesterday says the toxic combination of unchecked misconduct by senior officials and retaliation against rank and file whistleblowers undermined employee morale, reflected in the agency's astronomical attrition rates, as high as 20% in some segments of the workforce during the period in question, and abysmal ranking in government-wide job satisfaction survey. 336 out of 339 agencies and components in 2017. The first part of the committee's report dealt with alleged misconduct from agency administrators. One official, for example, is accused of sexually harassing more than one worker. Mark Livingston, who supervised one of those employees, says he was threatened when he confronted the alleged harasser. He told me if I didn't lie for him that I was going to be on his S list, Livingston told the investigators. And then, when I told him that I would not lie after he sexually harassed her, he told me that if I didn't, him and the others couldn't work with me. A source tells ABC News that the alleged harasser is Joseph Salvatore, who still works at the agency as Deputy Director of Security Operations. In 2016, Salvatore was accused of harassment in the Washington Post by Alyssa Bermudez, a former TSA worker. Salvatore wasn't alone, the report says. In 2015, for instance, a TSA official was arrested for driving while intoxicated. She blamed another TSA employee who claimed she had driven the car before abandoning her. The official eventually confessed to the DWI, and the TSA's Office of Professional Responsibility recommended she be fired. Instead, she got a 2-week suspension. In another case, the report says a senior TSA official at a Midwestern airport called Muslims, quote, stupid ragheads and made mooing sounds at a pregnant worker. Despite numerous complaints from employees, the official was allowed to engage in inappropriate behavior for at least 7 years. The report says. How were TSA officials able to get away with such misconduct? According to the report, whistleblowers and other disfavored employees were punished with involuntary directed reassignments, meaning they often had to move hundreds of miles away. The TSA has since changed its directed reassignment policy, the committee says, but was still forced to pay out at least $1 million in settlements to affected workers. Finally, the report says the agency obstructed investigations into TSA misconduct and retaliation when the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Special Counsel investigated many of the allegations. The TSA either wouldn't release relevant documents or produced heavily redacted documents, the report says. So, yeah, apparently, go figure, disgusting, toxic three-letter agency is disgusting and horrible on the inside as well. Go figure.
Precisely. I mean, I'm not actually surprised in the slightest that it is a bit. I mean, you gotta think that these people know that they're not well loved for what they're doing. Nobody really thinks they're doing that much benefit in the process of this. And it is a massive intrusion. And I'm sure some of them feel that it's really problematic. And as a result, they have real qualms about actually working for that branch of the government. I like to think that there are at least a few of them out there. I mean, it's probably optimistic, and those who see this obviously are galled by it. And it doesn't surprise me as well that if you give somebody access and the right to do these types of things to people, that perverts and molesters and whatnot and assaulters would actually be attracted to that role. Because despite the potential of losing your job, the reality is that the state doesn't want people rocking the boat, and it's more likely to rock the boat to make that information public than to brush it under the carpet somehow. It's sad, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I for the record, I still think those of us traveling are still. I don't feel worse for the people who chose to sign up to work for this, garbage agency. But yeah,
They
certainly
made
it's
that choice.
yeah.
You got to take some responsibility for what jobs you pick and what you do. It's
Yeah,
just
and
as
as you
simple as
said,
that.
yeah, and as you said, it's very attractive to many people because of the false job security offered by all of these government jobs, but then they act surprised when things are all broken inside. It's but of course they have no incentive to be honest about any problematic things with the agency, considering they already have obviously a well-deserved bad public. Bad public reputation in the first place. So
Hmm, precisely. I mean, the worst thing, and I'm gonna segue in a minute to China, but yeah, the worst thing about it to me is the fact that it's a few bad apples in the bunch. And the saying isn't a few bad apples are okay to leave about. The saying is a few bad apples spoil the bunch because the rot expands very, very quickly to the others in the bunch. So when you leave a few people in to fester and corrupt the system, you'll breed more and more corrupt officials running in that system. It's just a given. But To move on, I think that's enough about vile molesters. Government officials. Let's head over to a different type of issue, unfortunately, relating to the government, but perhaps some good news. Well, depending on your point of view, obviously. This is from the South China Morning Post. U.S. tells China, we want competition, not cooperation. Even at Washington Embassy highlights difference in the two sides' perspectives. As senior Trump aide, Matt Pottinger delivers blunt message. This was published today. By Keegan Elmer. The United States sees its relationship with China as a competition. A senior member of the Trump administration has told Chinese diplomats at an event that highlighted the gulf between two sides' worldviews. While Kui Kai, China's ambassador to the U.S., used the reception at his country's embassy in Washington to highlight the importance of cooperation, Matt Pottinger, a senior director for Asian affairs on the National Security Council, made America's intentions clear. In the United States, competition is not a four-letter word, Pottinger said. We at the Trump administration have updated our China policy to bring the concept of competition to the forefront. It's right there at the top of the president's national security strategy. Air was speaking at a reception on Saturday to mark China's National Day, but Pottinger's language was unusually direct for an event to celebrate the founding of the People's Republic of China. The notion of freedom and competition sat at the core of America's democracy and market economy, Pottinger said, adding that failing to acknowledge the competition between the two sides would lead to misunderstandings and miscalculations. If names cannot be correct, then language is not in accordance with the truth of things. And if language is not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success, he said, using a quotation from Confucius. For his part, Kui in China sat and said that China and the US both faced a historic choice about the future of their relations. China has already made its choice, Kui said. We are committed to the principle of no conflict, no confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation with the US. On trade, Kui reiterated China's assertion that it would, quote, open its door wider to the outside world, and said China would firmly safeguard the international order to promote free trade. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump accused Beijing of meddling in the upcoming U.S. midterm elections without initially offering any evidence for his claim. Trump later tweeted photos of a 4-page supplement published in an Iowa newspaper, the Des Moines Register, criticizing the trade war and paid-for state-run China Daily. On Sunday, U.S. Ambassador to China Terry Branstad, a former Iowa governor, defended Trump's accusations, describing the China Daily advertisement as, quote, propaganda, and accused Beijing of taking advantage of U.S.'s freedom of the press. Branstad went on to accuse China of unfair state intervention in the economy, economic espionage, and implementing non-tariff barriers that hurt U.S. firms. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi rejected Trump's claims during his address to the United Nations in New York, saying Beijing upheld its principle of non-interference in other countries' domestic affairs. In another speech at the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations, Wang said the relationship was easy to break it, but will be difficult to restore a broken glass. Wang argued bilateral ties were at a crossroads and said the U.S. must decide whether China was a partner or a rival. That's the end of that particular article. So yeah, China's, again, difficult to predict them at times. They can react very quickly and sometimes a little bit without warning.
It's funny that Trump accused them of, excuse me, of meddling.
Yeah, no, well, I wouldn't be surprised if both sides are meddling somehow with each other. Whether or not any of these people are friends is a big question, but keep your friends close and your enemies closer is a mantra some ascribe to. I personally think keeping your enemies at an extremely long distance away with much in between you is a far better solution. But hey, um, the the problem that I've got with the the rhetoric itself as it's coming out is the concept of competition is a little bit of a paradox for China. They accept that market economics do work because they have been increasingly trying to become more capitalist in nature, and they are following the money. Problem that they've got is they are coming to their own kind of mini crisis. They don't really know how they can keep this going. I know they don't because they can't. Not without problems occurring in the main. Eventually, they'll become developed. Once they do that, the expectations get higher and higher and higher upon them to provide more and more and more. And the system won't be able to do it. So either they have to adopt full capitalism and accept the system can't regulate it, or they will revert back to the way that they were before, try socialism, fail, and then revert back to capitalism. And there'll be this bouncing arc, which will slowly steady over time. But as long as the party is in play, it's going to be tricky for anybody to get competition as being something to the forefront because they don't. It's a concept that at this point in time, people don't really get. Competition is about creating win-win situations, not lose-lose ones or win-lose ones even. You try not to create null or negative sum games. You try and create positive sum ones. And by doing that, you can create a lot of benefit all around for your local area. The more you make that difficult to create a positive sum game, the more you restrict the market's ability to make that viable, the more problematic it will become in the long run for you to actually make any benefits real for anybody. So, again, it's a fine line that they're treading here at the moment. And same for the US. They're on the other end of that line. They've been trying socialism and they're moving back the other way. So it's a bit of a weird one, really. I don't know which direction it'll go. If it's the way that I expect it will, there's going to be a little bit of friction and then a lot more towards more trade. And China is acting, I read a different article, I think, to reduce its tariffs in general for exports to or imports to actually be more available now in China, from a cost perspective at least. They'll be more likely to be bought. So they are actively increasing the standards of, or the ability for competition to occur in China. That said, there are all sorts of other regulations you need to have to trade in China, just like there are for the EU or the UK. So whether or not you can even say you have your company over there is a bit of a mystery to me.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
But I think we've run a little bit over, but let's quickly hit a few bits up from the chat. Again, apologies to the chat as well. I did try to share some of the links directly in chat, but it just would not. Google would not let me. Don't know why. Didn't have time to work it out, but they are in the descriptions. Um, the Inscrutable Chinese from Daniel Hatfield. Gregory Patrick. Conan say, crush thine enemies and hear the lamentation of the women. Come to think of it, I suppose that's a bit harsh. And from Max Ogburn, I hope you're right about the US, but I'm doubtful. Well, again, wait and see. I have no idea one way or the other which way things are going to go. It's basically a giant reality TV show program to me now, from over here watching US politics. And it's really nice with popcorn or brownies or maybe even your dinner. But I would not want to have to live within it right now. And I'm glad I don't. We have British politics and they're crazy enough on their own. Anyway, I think that about wraps things up for us today. So, as our founder would have said, smash the state, fuck the system, and have a bad morning, everybody.
Bad morning, everyone.